Hey guys, welcome back to True Crime with Shannon, where I cover missing persons, unsolved cases, crime news, and more. Well, I'm going to try to get into a bit of the hot mess that Dr. Dorothy Lewis's testimony was for 2 days on the stand this week. But before I get into that, I kind of wanted to go over a bit of information I looked up on Dr. Lewis, just so I was familiarized with her. The defense called on Dr. Lewis to professionally, evaluate Tisha Stauch to determine her mental state. As part of that evaluation, Lewis said she interviewed Stauch for 14 hours. And then she consulted with social workers and investigators and poured through countless documents to come to her conclusion. Now, listening to her testimony, I wondered how much she actually read because she doesn't seem to remember a lot, but that's a whole nother thing. Let's see. Dr. Lewis, I found out she's got degrees, and she did mention this on the stand when they qualified her. She's got degrees from Harvard University as well as the Yale School of Medicine. She also had completed a fellowship with Yale and other research programs. She published a book in 1998, Guilty by Reason of Insanity, which had later become an HBO documentary speaking on her career called Crazy, Not Insane. She spent her career interviewing more than 20 serial killers, including Ted Bundy. Dr. Lewis's curiosity of trying to understand killers caused her to want to look into Adolf Hitler. She wanted to understand why he was so cruel and what led him to be so violent. So basically, she, got into this line of work because she was curious about why people were so cruel and why they became violent, and her ways of thinking and her practices have long been in question, and a lot of other professionals in the field don't necessarily agree with Dr. Lewis's, thinking and the way she works. So I'm going to play just a bit of the end of the defense's examination of Dr. Lewis and going into the beginning of the cross-examination by the state. And of course, I will link to Law and Crimes streams on both days. So if you want to go through that, you are more than welcome to. So let's check it out.
Despite not having the EEG or the MRI, in your report, you indicated that Miss Stout was one of the most mentally ill people you'd ever come across.
Yes, the most complex.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. The more I study her and the more I remember what happened and go over it, she has such a variety of different signs, symptoms, and behaviors. She has many of the signs, symptoms, behaviors of a dissociative identity disorder. She also, if you follow the material, as you recall, I could not remember it clearly. If you follow the parts that I couldn't remember, they're confused. They make no sense. They are psychotic. They're incomprehensible by an ordinary human being. And if they were to be read aloud to you, you would not make head or tail of them. So that I find this complicated. And it would have helped me if I could have at least eliminated or included a particular central nervous system dysfunction that I could deal with. It's always fun for a doctor to be able to treat and to be able to make something better. And so far, we're not able to do that.
Despite that, are you able to come with an expert opinion regarding her sanity at the time of the death of Gannon?
Yes.
What is your opinion?
Well, I think that she was that assuming that this area is about the time that Gannon was killed.
Yes.
She was psychotic at the time. She was not in touch with reality, and she did not. I don't think she knew the difference between right and wrong. I don't know whether she even knew what she was doing.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Young.
What's the legal definition of insanity in the state of Colorado, Doctor?
Oh, I believe that you must know the nature of what you have done and that it was wrong, and that also I think that you do add on a bit of the Durham decision, which has to do with if you cannot control your behaviors, such as to comply with the requisites of law. I believe that that is also part of an insanity defense here.
Did you look at the statute regarding insanity for the state of Colorado prior to rendering an opinions in this case?
I did, but I would have to look at it again to look at it. And I've also discussed it with others, which is why I added the Durham decision and the ability to conform your behavior, because to my mind, in many courts where I've testified, that is no longer accepted. But it was my understanding from the attorneys that that is also an aspect of insanity, the inability to conform your behavior to what is required by law.
Is that the aspect that you used in rendering your opinions in this case?
That is only one of the aspects.
Well, tell us the elements. This is what you're here for. You're here to testify that this defendant was saying at the time she committed this crime. I'd like you to explain to the jury now what law you used in rendering that opinion.
Would you permit me to read it, and I will tell you what aspects of it I
You're the expert,
concentrated on. By and large, I used the McNaughton definition of whether the person knew the nature of what he or she was doing and that it was wrong. And so that was my, that was my orientation. And then I was pleased to learn from the attorneys that also the inability to conform one's behavior to the requirements of law was also part of the definition in Colorado. The accuracy of that, I don't know, but we have discussed it, and I've said that I was surprised. I was unaware that in the other states, that since the Reagan shooting, I had thought that most of that was not any longer recognized, but I was told by the attorneys that that was one of the other factors that played a role.
As you sit here right now, do you know the legal definition of insanity in the state of Colorado?
If you would show me show me as it is written out, I will tell you whether this is what I used. I can't say it to you verbatim, but the idea has to do with whether you knew the nature of what you were doing and that it was wrong.
Well, clearly you have experience in testifying in criminal cases. You said 100 or 200 times, right?
Right.
And so you know that when you write a report, that report comes to the prosecution, comes to the defense, it goes to the court, correct?
Yes, usually.
And in your report, you want to put what the legal definition of insanity is in the state of Colorado, because that's what you're here for. That's what you're here to testify about, correct?
When you have written a complete report with all of the data that you require to come to that conclusion, and then try to go word by word with the definition, yes, you would try to use that. Here we were using as much data as we could get, and again, if I'm mistaken and it is not an understanding of the nature of what the person is doing and that it is wrong, then I've made an error.
Well, this is what you say about insanity in your report. You say, based upon the evidence that I reviewed, in my opinion, Ms. Stock was insane at the time of the homicide and the days following, period.
That's right. And I believe that at the time she was psychotic. And whether you use the McNaughton definition, whether you use the Durham decision or a variation of it, she was psychotic at the time. I believe she did not know what she was doing. I'm not certain she even knows that she did do it now as we speak.
Okay.
And that it was wrong is if she doesn't know that she did it, the question of whether or not she knows it is wrong is something that can be debated. But I think that she does not appreciate the nature of what she did, or that it was wrong, and that she is guilty of having murdered Gannon.
So she's guilty of having murdered Gannon, but she's legally insane as well. Is that what you're saying?
I think that she murdered Gannon. I shouldn't use the word guilty. She murdered Gannon. Again, I think you're teasing me a bit. If you would just rephrase that, I can tell you whether, because you're making me feel, gee, maybe there's a totally different definition here. But from our discussions recently about this, what had struck me most about Colorado was that you also included an inability to conform one's behavior to what was required by law. I don't know if that's wrong, but this is what I discussed with her attorneys, and part of at least what I have gone by. In addition, I believe that she did not know the nature of what she was doing.
But you knew when you came here, you're coming to Colorado, you knew that your opinion would be applied to the law in Colorado, and you knew this jury here would be listening to your opinion to see if what you had to say made sense with the law.
Yes.
You've done that to 100 to 200 times, correct?
I would guess, yeah.
And I've read your other reports. In your other reports, you define what insanity is in that particular state, and you explain in your report why you think someone was legally insane at the time based on the law. Why did you not do that in this case?
I would have to look at the definition, and I'm sure once I look at it, I can tell you why I did not use the exact words that perhaps are there. What a reason why, in plain English, I did not. I believe she was insane is that she is psychotic. When someone is psychotic, they are out of contact with reality. They do not know the nature of what they are doing, whether it is right, wrong, or indifferent. And she is and was psychotic, and therefore she was insane. If you wish to give that a different flourish or something different about it, I very much doubt that what I'm saying to you will conflict with what you're saying. Is there some reason that her being psychotic and not knowing right from wrong or what she was doing, that this is not insanity in your state?
Did you write this report, doctor?
Of course I wrote the report. I wrote, this is not a complete report. I wrote, I wrote it, sent it, and had it typed. Yes.
Who typed it?
I cannot tell you who typed it.
Who'd you send it to?
I sent it to Mr. Tellini.
What did you send to Mr. Tellini?
You have them.
And I'm asking you a question, doctor. What did you send to Mr. Tellini?
I sent him a brief report. Initially, there is an early title that is a preliminary psychiatric impression, and then subsequently modified it to try to include anything that I had left out. If after he saw my initial report, if I had left anything out that I thought should be there.
What you left out in your initial report was your opinion with regards to insanity, correct?
In my initial communication with him, absolutely. I gave him what I had up until then.
And you requested in your initial evaluation that you wanted an MRI done, an EEG done, as well as a neuropsych exam with several tests that you listed in your report, correct?
Right?
And you wanted those done before you rendered an opinion as to insanity in the state of Colorado, correct?
I wanted it before I testified, yes.
And none of those items got done.
No.
Yet you still issued a second report claiming that she's insane without any definition of why she's insane.
Well, I gave you the definition that she is psychotic and gave you the data to show it, but I did not write it in the form in which I would if I had all of those data to include in it. And I did not have them. And, I could not include as it was my understanding that the court refused to finance the EEG and the MRI and the neuropsychological testing. So I gave you as much as I could from
Let's talk about that. On October 13th, 2022, you were scheduled to come testify to this court about why you wanted an EEG and MRI done, correct? You recall that?
No. But say that again?
Do you not recall being asked?
I really don't want to say that it's her age, because I don't want to insult her age. I think she's got a lot of education, and she's known as a smart woman, whether or not we agree with her her ways of thinking and what have you. But she's 85 years old, and I just don't know if it's her memory is going or what the situation is here, because this is the sort of thing that just continues throughout the cross examination, and she doesn't remember. She says this and that, and the state totally gets her on every single one. So let's continue.
Asked to come testify with regards to why you needed an EEG done and an MRI done in this case.
I do not know what you are referring to. I have no idea what you're referring to, because I would have been pleased to at least talk on the phone to the judge or whatever. I begged to have these things done. I can only tell you that. And I would have spoken to anyone who wanted to talk to me about it.
Well, you were contacted well before February 2022 on this case, correct?
Absolutely.
And you were contacted before Ms. Stout pled not guilty by reason of insanity, correct?
Right.
And she pled not guilty by reason of insanity on February 11th of 2022, correct?
I'm assuming your dates are correct, yeah.
And you didn't do anything on this evaluation until November of 2022?
I worked as hard as I could to get these. In fact, I called the neurologist for free, Dr. James Marikangas, to discuss the case because I could not get funding from this court to get these tests done. So I called and discussed it with him. I contacted Catherine Yeager, Dr. Yeager, the neuropsychologist with whom I've worked for 30 years, and worked with her and spoke with her and got as much data as I possibly could. And I begged her attorneys to get this, and their answer was that the court would not pay for those tests to be done. I had never heard. In fact, I said I've never heard of this before, but it did not occur to me to pick up the phone and to call the judge. I didn't even know who the judge was, but I was told I could not get this and that I must get something in by then. So I didn't even call my initial contact a complete report on it. Well, I'm trying to see what I called it. I called it initial psychiatric impression, right?
Right, yeah, because you wanted that information before you rendered an opinion as to insanity, correct?
That is true.
And, at this time, I'd like the court to take judicial notice that on October 13, 2022, the request to have an EEG done, an MRI done by defense was withdrawn, and we did not go to hearing on that.
Mr. Tellini, defense position? Court will take judicial notice that on October 13 of 2022, the defense withdrew its request for an EEG in this case,
As well as MRI.
as well as an MRI.
Were you ever told that?
This is news to me right now. So
And of course, if this would have been done, it would have been 3 years after the crime happened.
it would have been later, yes.
And so there'd be a gap between the time of the crime and the time the MRI and EEG were done.
Yes.
A lot of things could have happened in the jail within that time period that may have caused damage to Miss Stauch's head.
This is just speculative. It would have been extremely helpful to get those data and then to see whether they looked like the kind of material that was something that would have been long lasting or something that was sudden, so that I can't really speculate on that. I did want it done then, and it mattered then.
But it didn't get done, and yet you still rendered your opinion, didn't you?
I rendered and I've described what I know about the case, and I've given you my opinion of it. Yes.
Despite what you wrote in your book, guilty by reason of insanity. You're familiar with your book, right? That it's easy to fake mental illnesses, especially when it comes to dissociative identity disorder. And that's why you want collateral information like an MRI or an EEG to corroborate, correct?
It's not exactly correct. You don't get that to corroborate dissociative identity disorder. No, you get that to corroborate neurologic or neuropsychological impairment. No, you don't get that for dissociation.
Page 108. You've probably heard this a million times when you testified, I would imagine, right?
I don't know. You'd have to.
Okay.
I don't.
Let me read it to you. Psychiatry, as every prosecutor who has ever cross-examined me has never hesitated to point out, is a soft discipline compared with the harder medical discipline of, say, neurology. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah, there it is.
The difference between neurology and psychiatry is analogous in some ways to the difference between hard neurologic signs and soft neurologic signs. Sound familiar?
Yes, go ahead.
An MRI shows abnormal mass in the brain. The EEG shows localized spike and wave complexes. In other words, evidence of brain damage is clear. Remember saying that?
Or I should have said of brain dysfunction. I said of brain damage.
Yeah. You said evidence of brain damage is clear.
Correct. Should say of brain dysfunction.
Okay. What did you mean by that? Is that why you wanted the MRI and the EEG?
Of course I wanted that, but not in order to, you would not get a special, as I said to the jury, you would not get a special MRI or EEG based on a dissociative disorder. If, however, you do get this abnormal MRI or EEG, you then start looking in another direction and you start thinking not only may we have dissociation, but there is some kind of documented brain dysfunction. It's operating differently. And so you would like that because you would Mr. Tellini would have a lot easier case if he were able to document that a lot of her signs, symptoms, and behaviors are the result of abnormal electrical activity. And or, as in a recent case that I did early, I think
And
last
doctor, I'm going
fall,
to stop you there. Let me stop you there, doctor,
that.
because I want to stick to my questions here, okay? The EEG or MRI could have showed nothing as well, right? No
Right.
brain damage.
That's right.
And that would also help you in forming your opinion as well, wouldn't it?
Well, it certainly would not have confirmed a documented neurologic dysfunction.
And so all you had to go on is really Ms. Stauch's self-reporting to you in the forensic interview that you conducted.
Well, that's simple. I can't go along with that. That's all we had. But we did not have the additional neuropsychological and neurological data that I would very much have liked and I would still like. And I had no idea that this was ever withdrawn. It was my idea, or it was my understanding, that the court had refused to grant the funding to have these things done, which in my experience is a first.
Well, now you know what happened, though. So why do you keep saying you know what happened?
I
The
don't.
court just took judicial notice that the defense withdrew their request.
I know what you're telling me, but it would be presumptuous for me to say I know now. You've put me in the middle of a debate that I can't enter into.
Why did Mr. Tellini contact you? Did he tell you?
I assume because he thought that I was reputable and experienced in this field. I think he also became aware that I existed because of the documentary that was done on my work and my life.
About dissociative identity disorder.
No, about all of my work.
When you advised him that you felt there was enough evidence for the defendant to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, what did you base that on?
I based that on, probably in my own head, I based it on the McNaughton rule, which would be that she did not know the nature of what she had done, and or that it was wrong. And also subsequently, after discussing it with Mr. Tellini, based on the Durham decision that she did not have control over what she was doing, that she could not conform her behavior to that which the law required.
How did you know that back in February of 2022 when you hadn't interviewed her until November of 2022?
I'm sorry. I would have to look over what I had looked at and what I had, what I had reviewed up to the time. And I'm sorry, I can't give you the dates so that we can.
Well, did you review anything prior to talking to Mr. Tellini for the first time about the defendant changing her plea to not guilty by reason of insanity?
I'm not aware of his having changed a plea. No, I assumed, in fact, when he called me, that he thought that probably that there was an insanity defense here, and I did not think that he had one. He was pleading not guilty first, and then changed it to NGRA. I don't know.
You don't remember?
No, it isn't that I don't remember. It's that I assumed when he called me that he suspected that there was that she was suffering from a severe mental disorder that conformed to the criteria for insanity.
And when that happens, you had done hundreds of forensic evaluations with a lot of people who are on death row, some serious big-time murderers. Is that fair? There's a difference between a death penalty case and a homicide case, correct?
Yes.
Death penalty people are the worst of the worst.
Oh, and it depends on what your state is like. No, it doesn't depend on the worst of the worst. It depends on what the law is in your state and the humanity of your state. It doesn't depend on the worst of the worst.
So people who kill and commit serious crimes are usually charged with death penalty cases. Is that fair?
Say that the people say that once more.
You tell me. What's
I
the
don't know
difference between a normal homicide case and a death penalty case?
where the state in which you commit your offense.
The more you listened to Dr. Lewis testify, it just got more and more difficult to understand if she was understanding what she was saying, and then we watched portions of her interviews with LETECIA, and that was very hard to hear. And there was a moment that she supposedly was this Maria alter that she has, and the prosecution had asked Dr. Lewis that if LETECIA had the capacity to know right from wrong, or she has that, and Dr. Lewis really couldn't clearly answer that question, and they went further to ask if LETECIA can use rational thinking, or if she had the intent to kill when she attacked Gannon. And, she stabbed him, hit him in the head and shot him, and then, stuffed him in a suitcase, cleaned up the crime scene, and still seemingly acted, normal, whatever that is for LETECIA. And Dr. Lewis, continued to testify that she didn't know, what was going through LETECIA's mind during that time, and that she believed that, LETECIA loved Gannon. And it's so weird to me because this was her job. I mean, the defense was hanging their hat on this doctor testifying that LETECIA is insane and she's got this DID disorder, and I personally think she came off as more scattered and just not with it, and she would continually say that she didn't have a certain paperwork, and then all of a sudden it appeared, and it's just it drove you crazy, and then they also the state asked her if she knew right from wrong when she dumped Gannon's body. And Dr. Lewis said that she had the capacity to know that she needed to hide the body, but she didn't know if that meant she knew right from wrong. So there are just more and more questions with Dr. Lewis. And, she later on claimed that this quote unquote alter personality of Maria, who apparently spoke in some Russian Spanish accent, it was the protector of LETECIA, and that she believed that Maria was the one that attacked Gannon and viewed him as a threat. So it's such a very strange thing. If Dr. Lewis didn't come across to me as knowing anything really. She sure loves to hear the sound of her voice, so that's one thing that she and LETECIA have in common. But as far as being able to answer a lot of the mental capacity stuff, I think there's still so many questions that, gosh, I mean, I think the defense was just like, oh dear, we're in trouble. And that's just putting it mildly. But we lost the audio when we got to the questions from the jury. They basically asked some more questions on that. So thanks to some of the media present in the room, they were able to report on what happened the end of Wednesday's testimony, the end of court on Wednesday, rather, that when we lost the audio when it came down to the questions from the jury. the couple of the questions the jury asked, were there any tests performed that proved that she wasn't malingering from DID? And Dr. Lewis answered no. They also asked, when you opened the Bellevue Hospital, the number of the cases, did they increase? And when it closed, did the numbers go down? And Dr. Lewis said she didn't know, which seemed to be par for the course for her. She doesn't seem to know a lot of the answers to questions. So those were the two, questions that the jury had for Dr. Lewis. And then when the judge asked LETECIA if she was going to testify on Friday, she said no, which I have a mixed feeling on that. I think if she got up there, though, we'd think we'd be there for the rest of the year. That said, there was a lot of drama in the courtroom, specifically during Dr. Lewis's testimony, and her son was not only in the courtroom, he was in the interviews with LETECIA, which is highly irregular, and I believe that could be even potentially a HIPAA violation. But again, this woman doesn't seem to want to follow a lot of rules. She was late constantly to court. So I'm hoping that the jury kind of doesn't, basically discounts her testimony and goes by more of the credible witnesses, because, they don't have to believe everything that they're, every witness that comes on that stand. It's the jury, they get to decide what they make their decision by. So I'm hoping that they'll go by that. So we have closing arguments on Friday, and I'm assuming that the jury will get the case on Friday at some point. And I'm suspecting either a very quick verdict, which will have one, Friday night, or at the latest Monday. That's my thinking. But you guys let me know what you think about that. And of course, we'll get to see that tomorrow. With that said, that's all I've got for this one. And I will do another video closing out the LETECIA STAUCH trial and the justice for Gannon. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. And most of all, stay safe.